Yo, there is now over $100 million worth of Bitcoin that has been drained from the cold card exploit. As new developments continue to come, the idea of holding your own Bitcoin is being put into question. So today we've got a Bitcoin self-custody expert on the show to help us navigate all of this and discuss all the best ways that you can hold your own Bitcoin safely. I want to welcome on the stage, we got Dhruv. Dhruv is the co-founder and CSO of Unchained. He also studied mathematics and physics at Columbia University and pursued a PhD in physics in the University of Texas at Austin. So, expert to say the least. Dhruv, I haven't seen you in years. Welcome to the show. How are you? How are you doing? Crazy, crazy weekend. I would say July 30th was the day that will forever live in infamy in terms regarding the Bitcoin movement overall.
Yeah, one of the more intense weekends of my career in Bitcoin for sure.
So Dhruv, let's kind of break it down. I'm gonna piggyback off what I was saying yesterday. I think the idea of holding your Bitcoin on a single signature device, I think that especially if it's your life savings, if it's a token amount, that's a different conversation. But if it's your life savings, I think multi-sig should become the standard. I think the tricky part is navigating multi-sig, because multi-sig kind of adds complexity to that. So Unchained has this incredible product where you guys have an excellent UI, UX, where it makes it very easy for a user that perhaps isn't technically savvy to set up a collaborative custody setup. So could you talk a little bit about that? And then I want to talk more so about the cold card exploit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a strange week, guys. I'll put that out there. The tenor, the emotions. If I'm honest, part of me feels strange talking about, hey, I have a solution to this problem, when there's so many people who are just right now having the emotions and the reactions to what's happening to them. But at the same time, it is true. If you're using Bitcoin in any way, you're kind of living in the future. And I think if you're engaging in self-custody, even more so. And I would say if you're in multi-sig or collaborative custody at Unchained, even more so. I think for a lot of people, getting into Bitcoin seemed okay. And then when you have exchange hacks, you sort of realize the value of self-custody. When you're already in self-custody and you have an event like what has happened this past week, you start to realize the value of not having single points of failure and wanting things like multi-sig or collaborative custody to protect you. I'm very happy to go talk more about that. But maybe we can talk more about the underlying events and what's happened, and want to make sure anybody listening to this, if they're not already aware, is taking actions and steps to do the right things for their holdings.
Absolutely. So what are you guys officially recommending? I could tell you a little bit what we recommended here at Simply Bitcoin. Out of an abundance of caution, I've been telling everybody, move your funds away from the cold card device. It's unfortunate because that was perceived to be the gold standard for a lot of the Bitcoin maximalist community. But out of an abundance of caution and precaution, move your Bitcoin off of the cold card device, especially as the dust settles. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, what we've seen, just based on chain analytics, is that about 22,000 Bitcoin has moved from self-custodial wallets onto exchanges. Now, that could be a temporary measure, but I think our goal here at Simply Bitcoin is for individuals to reclaim back their financial sovereignty. And the way that you do that is via self-custody. So what is your official position, Dhruv, in terms of what are you guys recommending? I'm sure you guys have had an incredibly busy weekend, especially since your product is collaborative multi-sig custody.
Yeah, it has been busy. I would say that, first and foremost, I try to frame this as don't have single points of failure, but like what's behind that, right? What's behind not having single points of failure is ultimately the irreversibility of Bitcoin as an underlying asset class, as a monetary network. Payments cannot be reversed, which means if you lose access to your private keys, or if someone else gets access to them, whether that's through a leak or your computer being hacked, or in this case, a weak source of entropy, because there's no takebacks, and that you really need to be able to survive multiple things going wrong. And I understand the sort of reflexive reaction to an event like this is, see, that's why self-custody doesn't work, right? Because it can break in this way. I think that's a little naive. I think this is just one more example of why having a single point of failure, in this case, a single manufacturer's device, That's the real problem. And different people will look at this issue differently. I think there's an eagerness to blame always in a situation like this that happens. Like it's driven by fear and anger and frustration and hurt feelings. Um, I would stay out of that myself personally. It's as a developer, mistakes happen. I know that they happen. Um, I trust the people at Coldcard and NVK and all the developers there for many years as people who really tried their best. I thought that they were putting out something that was solid and secure, but they made a mistake. I trust Bitcoin developers and most Bitcoin companies and hardware manufacturers to try their best. I really do. I trust myself and my team at Unchained to try our best, but I don't trust anybody to not make mistakes, including myself, including our team at Unchained. And so rather than assuming that we will be perfect or that any vendor will be perfect or that any exchange will be perfect or that any process will be perfect, we've always designed things at Unchained to assume that something will fail. In fact, anything will fail. And you just must be able to tell yourself a story about how when that piece fails, you'll still be safe. And I think that's the key insight. So if you're afraid of self-custody because of something like this and you're wanting to embrace exchanges or custodians who will solve the problem for you, that doesn't strike me as the best response. They can also fail. We know that that's the history of Bitcoin. We've been there in prior cycles. People are doing a lot of tallies right now, right? They're tallying up like how many coins were lost over exchanges versus how many were lost via self-custody and so forth. And it's nuanced, right? It's difficult to, something I was considering just this morning was the amount of coins that have been stolen from self-custody is actually probably quite small historically compared to the amount that have been stolen or locked out on exchanges. But a ton of Bitcoin has been lost, right? We know that something like 20 to 25% of the entire Bitcoin supply simply isn't owned by anybody anymore because it was destroyed or lost in the very early days of Bitcoin when self-custody was the only option. Instead of trying to like litigate which system is better, I think use a different label, right? Ask yourself how many Bitcoins were lost or stolen because of a single point of failure. And the answer is that's all of them. All of them were subject to that fundamental problem. So that's the thing to focus on, right?
So let's talk about that, right? The single point of failure aspect, and we did cover this on yesterday's show as well, right? Which is, I think that's the lesson learned here, right? Is even if one manufacturer and Drew, I like the way that you framed it, which is like, look, developers tried their best. This wasn't something that they wanted to happen, but this goes back to the single point of failure conversation, right? Because even if this exploit was discovered, if you had a collaborative multisig set up, especially with different manufacturers, even if one of the devices was compromised, your Bitcoin would be 100% safe, and it actually allows you to just switch out the device to another manufacturer, right?
Yeah, the vast majority of Unchained clients had exactly that experience. Like they either weren't using a Coldcard, they were using other brands, or Coldcard was one of the multiple keys in their vault. They used our platform to execute a standard sweep. They were able to build new vaults, move everything over. Their coins were never really at risk. The week has been intense for us because, of course, we do have some clients who decided to use two Coldcards. We've historically left that choice up to our clients. We feel like it's not our position to dictate to clients which devices they should prefer. Again, because all devices are fallible. If I can think to myself, something I wish I could have changed is I wish we had been a little bit more vocal about demanding that clients use multiple devices from different brands. I think that would have helped keep clients less stressed out during this last week. And I think a large percentage of our clients and the coins that were in those vaults at Unchained that had multiple Coldcards have been recovered already. We launched a slipstream functionality this past weekend that allowed clients to skip the mempool. We can get into some of the technical aspects of that, but essentially if you have two Coldcards, unless you were reusing addresses, which you shouldn't be doing, you were kind of safe until you broadcast a transaction to the mempool to recover your funds, at which point you were potentially at risk of RBF attacks and your funds being stolen. Annoyingly, the longer you wait to take action, the more likely those outcomes become because the more attackers are joining the fray with more and more equipment to back them. So that was a really dangerous position for some of our clients to be in. And I'm very happy to see that many hundreds of clients and many thousands of coins have taken advantage of that recovery method. So yes, for most people at Unchained, this has turned out to be a pretty easy to survive scenario, at least so far. And I'm incredibly thankful for that. And I'm truthfully very proud of what we built to keep our clients safe.
So let's talk about the specifically the people that used multiple cold cards in a multi-sig setup, right?
Mm-hmm.
How at risk were those people compared to people that just used, a single sig?
Yeah, there's it's a little technical of an answer, but I'll try to keep it straightforward. You let me know if I failed in that. If you have a single sig cold card, as you've used your wallet over time, you have spent and deposited coins into it. Every time you spent coins from your single sig wallet, you published to the Bitcoin blockchain something called a redeem script that contains a public key for your wallet. And typically, seeing a public key is not enough for anybody to determine the underlying private key. In the case of weak entropy, seeing that public key is enough for an attacker to determine, hey, that's coming from one of those cold cards with weak entropy, and now I know the private key behind it. With single sig, knowing a private key is also sufficient to enumerate all addresses associated with the wallet. Once you have the private key for the wallet, you have all the addresses. And so if you were using a single sig cold card and you had ever spent from your wallet, and your public key was out there, that meant the attacker could find your private key, which meant they could find all your addresses, and then they could use your private key to sweep all the funds out of all your addresses. The difference in multi-sig is you have multiple keys in your redeem script, so multiple public keys and multiple corresponding private keys. If you were using, let's say, an unchained situation where we typically have 2 out of 3 as our quorum size, so clients typically have 2 keys of their own, and then there's a third key which is operated by Unchained, which is not generated on a cold card, has nothing to do with cold cards, and is essentially independent of this attack. In those scenarios, you were safer, because even if you were using this multi-sig wallet with 2 cold cards, which in theory is enough to spend the funds, on the blockchain, people will find examples of your multi-sig with your 2 cold card public keys in it. Attackers will be able to identify that, hey, here's a multi-sig wallet, or at least a multi-sig input, and it's got these 2 compromised cold card keys, and they can still get your private keys for those cold cards. So nothing was really changed because of multi-sig from that perspective. The one difference is, having obtained those 2 private keys for your 2 cold cards, the attacker could not then subsequently enumerate all your other addresses. So they kind of knew the secret, but they didn't, like, they had the keys to the treasure chest, but they didn't know where the treasure was buried, right? In this analogy. And that gave our clients a significant amount of time to pause, prepare, for us to prepare some solutions that would allow clients to, transition their vaults. And then this angle with the mempool and RBF, ultimately, when you push your transaction out to move your funds, if attackers already know about your busted cold cards and they see that transaction out on the blockchain, they could potentially replace it using the RBF mechanism with a transaction of their own that steals those coins, again, because they have your private keys. So ultimately, the protection of multi-sig in the multiple cold card user case came down to not having enough information to reconstruct the wallet addresses merely from those private keys, right? Some additional data is required. And that's, of course, data if you're an Unchained client that is available to you through our platform, but it's not available to attackers. And so that was a crucial protection. Again, for clients who only had a single affected cold card device, none of these issues really mattered, because they're simply able to replace that single cold card device through the normal mechanisms that we offer in our application.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So basically, it was like they had. Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It was perfect. So basically, it was like the multi-sig offered 2 protections, right? So even if they use 2 cold card devices in the 2 of 3 setup, they still wouldn't have enough information, because they might have the key, but they didn't know where the treasure chest was until that transaction was broadcasted. And this is why you guys decided to use the slipstream. Could you talk a little bit about what the slipstream mechanism does?
Yeah, it's an interesting, it's philosophically very fascinating how this all worked out. Slipstream is an offering from the Mara mining pool, which I got to commend those guys. Awesome product. Prior to this week, we weren't necessarily talking about integrating or anything. We weren't seeing a lot of demand from our clients. But this week it turned out to be a huge, awesome fix. And just to review for the audience, typically when you broadcast a Bitcoin transaction that you sign with your private keys or whatever, it goes out to the public Bitcoin mempool, right? That all Bitcoin nodes in the world can see, and they can see all the transactions in there. And indeed, so can the mining pools. And it's from that public mempool that transactions are collected into block templates by miners and then ultimately mined into a Bitcoin block. As we discussed earlier, if you're someone that has a Coldcard, whether it's single sig or multi-sig, you publish this transaction saying, hey, I want to move all my Coldcard funds to somewhere else to rescue them, and you publish that transaction to the mempool, it's not just the miners who can see it, it's the attackers as well. And it's possible, if they're sufficiently fast, sufficiently well-resourced, for them to put out a competing RBF transaction to steal those funds. What the Slipstream solution does is it says, hey, let's skip broadcasting this transaction to the public mempool entirely. Let's instead send this transaction directly to a miner, in this case, Mara. And then Mara goes ahead and mines that transaction into a block directly. That block lands on the blockchain. The entire mempool has been skipped. And this is great because assuming that there's no uncling or other kinds of somewhat unlikely behavior, it means that the attackers will not be able to then RBF that transaction since it's already into a block. And that provided a lot of protection to our clients. And I'm very happy that we were able to launch that as quickly as we did, that the Mara team had launched that feature. There's an aspect of this that we can get into. It felt a little bit to us like this was kind of a preview of something like a Q-Day type attack, right? This was a larger discussion in the preceding 6 months about quantum resistance in Bitcoin and et cetera, et cetera. And if a quantum computer were to show up, what would it look like? Well, it would look kind of like this, right? It would look like suddenly public keys are no longer well protected, that simply seeing a public key can allow you to go back to a private key. So, of course, this current attack has nothing to do with quantum. It's simply due to weak entropy in a particular vendor's product, but it is functioning the same way. And indeed, in one of the struggles with a quantum computer is exactly this phenomenon that even if you're trying to rescue your funds or move them to some, let's say, post-quantum address or something in the future, there could still be this potential for when transactions hit the public mempool for them to be sniped by the person with the quantum computer. Just like today, your cold card-backed transactions can kind of be swiped by someone with sufficiently powerful computers, classical computers, who wants to steal them. And in both cases, one of the solutions that people have talked about is broadcasting transactions directly to miners. That turned out to be very useful in this case. So I'm glad that capability exists. Even though it wasn't on our product roadmap until 4 days ago, I'm pretty sure this feature will continue to remain in Unchained's product. Most people will probably never need to use this capability, but it's really nice to have the option in the platform to be able to avoid the mempool in strange situations like this. Yeah.
And Drew, another question for you, right? This is again, tragic moment, but also a lot of lessons learned. And specifically regarding the single point of failure aspect of this, what is the specific call to action for anyone that perhaps, still has their funds on a cold card, on a single sig, or they're stuck in kind of this multi-sig setup where they have, multiple of those keys are on cold cards? What is the call to action here? What resource can they tap into? What are your recommendations?
I don't want to be overly dramatic or anything, but the world is changing in a meaningful way. I think the hypothesis that this attack was discovered by latest generation AIs is a very reasonable hypothesis. That technology continues to improve. It makes sense that attackers will use it, just as will defenders or people building features. The world is getting more dangerous online. The internet has always kind of been a bad neighborhood in some ways, but it's getting worse. That's scary. And I think that means, in particular, a message for developers and technologists is we have to start getting really good at defense, and we have to spend way more time and energy on it than we probably ever did before. The message, I think, to just people and users in general is be wary of single points of failure in so many aspects of your life. It's not surprising to me that a new cyber attack capability that launches, that attackers get access to, is first and foremost immediately used to steal Bitcoin, right? Of course, that's what you would do if you had a powerful hacking machine, right? You're not going to try to steal dollars. You're not going to try to steal personal photos. You're not going to try to steal other digital assets. You're going to steal money. And so we as Bitcoiners, we're just seeing the effect of this technology first before it really starts to be used against other aspects of the digital ecosystem. And that means we're going to have to get good at protections first. So before you start thinking about single points of failure in your personal finances or your tax records or your digital storage or other aspects, you should probably think about it for your Bitcoin. And maybe a final, and how do you do that? Well, you have to use multi-sig if you're in self-custody. You have to use multiple vendors. If that's very complex for you or you want help, I would consider a firm like Unchained, Casa, Anchorwatch, Nunchuck. There's a lot of options out there that offer collaborative custody now, and I would find one that you like and stick with it.
I would push back on the Nunchuck one because they disclosed on that they were using MK4s for their entropy as well. But it is they are good overall. I really like the Nunchuck product.
They have a great product, and like a lot of people, they made a choice with the information that they had, and they chose a device that had a flaw in it. I have not followed the details in the last few days. I haven't had any time to do almost anything other than try to take care of my own clients. But I know them to be great developers and passionate Bitcoiners, and I hope that they survive this process despite having used a cold card. And I think because they're in collaborative custody, I hope that they will be able to. So I'm not sure. Maybe you won't recommend them, but I'll toss out just the idea in general of collaborative custody or multi-sig is really valuable. Also toss out, what else is a single point of failure? Fucking dying. And if you think that multi-sig, multi-vendor, you're going to now assemble 5 different wallets from 5 different companies and spread them out on 5 different continents, and then you die, what will your partner do? What will your family do? Like, you also are a single point of failure if you operate your protections in that way naively. And that's, I think for me specifically personally, part of why I built out these collaboration features at Unchained is because I wanted to solve inheritance problems for myself and for my family. So I don't mind sharing. I've done this many times publicly. When I use Unchained, I use our connections feature. I make sure to connect with my family members, and we build collaborative vaults where we're collectively as our family holding our keys, as well as Unchained. And this to me is both a way to avoid single points of failure on any specific vendor, on any specific platform. Remember, if I'm using Unchained, I can always go use open source tools to recover my funds. I'm not actually dependent on Unchained in any meaningful way. And importantly, it also takes away a single point of failure on me. So if I were to pass away, my family understands that they can reach out to Unchained, they can reach out to the other family members that are in my quorums, and they can recover funds together. They're not trying to figure out, where did I keep my private key? What was my pin on my hardware device? Like none of that is required. And so I find that to be very powerful, and it helps me sleep very safely. So I would really encourage Bitcoiners to start thinking about, what do I need to do to ensure that there's no single points of failure between me and recovering my Bitcoin in the event of a device problem, an entropy issue, a platform issue, or even my own death. No man likes to think about his own mortality, but in situations like this, one is reminded and perhaps should pay attention to that feeling.
And that's an incredible point, Drew. We didn't even mention that yesterday, but yes, your own mortality is a single point of failure, 100%. And currently, simply, in terms of the collaborative custody products, Unchained, Casa's great. Liana, I think, is doing some good stuff as well.
A great open source alternative in Liana. I also need to shout out Kevin, who was incredible during this last week at sourcing information, broadcasting, one of the earliest people talking about this. Rob at Anchorwatch.
Anchorwatch has done great work. Yeah.
I think Troy Cross called him a folk hero. I think that's correct. Like, people will be writing folk songs about his work this week.
Yeah, he was officially named the Bitcoin CEO for the month, right? Rob has done incredible work. And all of us, I would say, have just been, helping across the board people migrate away from Coldcard. And I just wanted to present this option to our audience, guys. Like, multi-sig can be complicated. But that's why companies like Unchained, Casa, the open source alternative like Liana exists. Of course, BitKey is a fantastic device. It has multi-sig built into the device. It has inheritance, as Drew has mentioned, the importance of that. But Drew, that we didn't cover the single point of failure in terms of the human aspect on yesterday's show. So I'm incredibly happy that you brought that up, because that's a really good point. What happens if you have all of your life savings in a single sig, and for whatever, God forbid, something happens to you? Can your family access that? Do they have the technical know-how? Do they have the technical capability? And then that opens the broader conversation. If you contact an expert, right? What are you telling that expert, and what can that expert do, right? So yes,
too often the solution that I hear from my friends who are in single sig is, sometimes I broach it, hey, maybe you should try multi-sig, maybe you should try on-chain, maybe you should think about this, buddy. You're pretty deep in coins right now. And I think sometimes the response I hear is, oh, I'm not worried about it. There's a copy of my seed phrase that I wrote down, and I, one time padded it with this page from Harry Potter, and it goes over here, and I left all these instructions, and it'll be fine. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, that is not going to work. Your bereaved wife is not going to go through that procedure. And someone else is going to read that and figure it out, or they're just going to fuck it up. Just to remind, like, the reason 20 to 25% of the world's Bitcoin is already lost is because of too clever approaches like this by people who didn't know better, who didn't have resources, who tried their best, but they weren't experts, and they made very silly mistakes. I worry that people, by virtue of, sometimes not knowing who to ask, sometimes not knowing who to trust, sometimes trusting the wrong person, sometimes not being sufficiently paranoid or sufficiently critical of their own abilities or of the people around them. I think sometimes people rely on illusory protections that they've not tested, and that's very worrisome to me.
Yeah. Well, Drew, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you have a hard stop. Guys, if you want to check out an amazing collaborative custody setup, I think multi-sig should become the standard if you are holding significant amounts of Bitcoin. Also, if you're thinking about the single point of failure in terms of your own mortality, Unchained is a great product that I would recommend. Casa as well, Liana, right? But I wanted to bring Drew on the show to talk about this specific topic for you guys today, because we've been talking about this nonstop for the last 3 days. So Drew, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody, we got a jam-packed show for you guys. We still have tons to cover. We're going to be talking about nation-state Bitcoin adoption later on in today's show. And then also the Bitcoin Policy Institute came out with a fantastic video really explaining what happened in terms of the random number generator bug on the Coldcard devices. It's really good to kind of visualize exactly what happened in terms of, in layman terms, right? So we have that video lined up for you guys. We're going to play it. We're going to be right back just after the break.
Here's the part that nobody says out loud. Buying Bitcoin on an exchange and leaving it there isn't buying Bitcoin. It's buying an IOU. And the last decade has been a masterclass in what happens when those exchanges don't deliver on their promises.
Bitcoin Well is a self-custody Bitcoin platform. That means that when you buy Bitcoin, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet. You actually own it from the very first transaction. They're available both in the United States and Canada. Pricing is transparent, straightforward, and no nonsense. And if you're buying a larger amount of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Well Infinite gives you concierge-level support through a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, premium help for when it actually matters.
You can also stack a little extra through the referral and wishing well rewards. A nice bonus on top of the owning your own Bitcoin thing. So go to bitcoinwell.com/simply and sign up for the Bitcoin Well portal today and buy Bitcoin you actually own. Paper burns, paper floods, paper fades. If your seed phrase is written on paper, it's not really backed up. It's waiting to disappear. Stampseed's DIY kit lets you hammer your seed words directly into commercial grade titanium. Fireproof, crush-proof, waterproof, and permanent. Once your words are in the metal, they aren't going anywhere. Use code SIMPLY at stampseed.com for 15% off anything in the store. That's stampseed.com, code SIMPLY.
All right, everybody, we are back. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $63,970. Block height 961,045. Market cap 1.28 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap 4.25%. Decline from all-time high, almost 50%. So I do want to, Opti, do you have the video prepped? I do want to show you guys this video from Bitcoin Policy Institute that really, in layman terms, explained what happened with the bug regarding Coldcard's random number generator and how severe it was. So we have that lined up for you guys. Opti, when you're ready, let's play it.
A Bitcoin wallet is protected by a seed phrase, a list of words that acts like the master key to the wallet. If someone discovers that phrase, they can take control of the Bitcoin inside. So what stops an attacker from simply guessing it? The answer is the number of possible seed phrases. A properly configured Bitcoin wallet chooses its seed from an incomprehensibly enormous pool. The larger and less predictable that pool is, the harder it is for an attacker to search. This is where randomness matters. The wallet needs a reliable source of randomness so that no one can predict which seed it will choose. But in affected Coldcard firmware, a bug caused the wallet to use a more predictable software generator. The seed phrases still looked random to their owners, but they were being selected from a much smaller set of possibilities. To understand how much smaller, let's turn those possibilities into something we can compare. We will let one atom represent one potential Bitcoin seed phrase. Somewhere in the full collection is one key atom, the seed that unlocks the wallet. We begin with a single atom, representing a single possible seed. Now zoom out to a protein. A protein contains about 2 to the power of 10 atoms. If this were the entire pool, a computer could test every possibility and find the key atom almost instantly. Zoom out again to a large virus, containing about 2 to the power of 30 atoms. In our simplified model, every potential Bitcoin seed phrase created by the affected Coldcard firmware fits inside this virus as atoms. A computer could search that full set in about 3 hours. That may sound enormous, but how does it compare with the search pool of a correctly generated 24-word Bitcoin seed phrase? Would it fill a grain of sand? A grain contains about 2 to the power of 60 atoms, not even close. What about Jupiter? At roughly 2 to the power of 180 atoms, it is still nowhere near large enough. The entire Milky Way contains roughly 2 to the power of 225 atoms. Surely that must be enough. Not quite. A properly generated seed has 2 to the power of 256 possibilities. To represent every one of those possibilities with an atom, we would need about 2 billion galaxies the size of the Milky Way. To hack a properly configured Bitcoin wallet, an attacker would need to find one specific atom hidden somewhere across those 2 billion galaxies. That is the scale of the Coldcard bug. It reduced the challenge from finding one atom across 2 billion galaxies to finding one atom inside a large virus.
That's wild. That's wild. And also too, like, just so you guys understand, like, what protects your seed essentially is just how many seeds there are, right? So like, think about it. All the atoms with all these galaxies, like that's an enormous amount of numbers, which makes it economically unfeasible to just start searching random seed phrases, right? Like the probability that you're going to find one is just extremely unlikely. But again, as this video pointed out, that was the core issue with the Coldcard bug, right? Is that there wasn't that many probabilities. And we had someone on the show yesterday, Luke DeWolf from BTC Helsinki, and he was just describing it like basically, look, like the probability that someone would have generated the same seed if Coldcard sold 70,000 devices would have been like 99%. So it wasn't actually there wasn't actual true entropy. There wasn't actually true randomness. And what protects you in Bitcoin is that true randomness. And then, as Drew mentioned, and as we've mentioned on yesterday's show, removing the single point of failure is key, right? Obviously, the BitKey is incredible because it's all in one hardware device. It has multi-sig built in. One of the keys lives on the device. One of the keys lives on your phone secure element, and then one of the keys lives on the on block servers, right? So again, there's no single point of failure there. And then, of course, the collaborative custody setups, like Unchained, like Casa, like Liana, are great. And normally I would recommend Nunchuck, but just because of Nunchuck's disclosure, saying that they were using MK4s to generate entropy for some of those keys, I can't recommend them at the moment. I'm sure they'll get that patched up, but for the time being, as the dust settles, we're trying to lay out all the possible options for you guys. Not to mention Seed Signer, ladies and gentlemen. I got to give a shout out to Seed Signer. Completely open source. You build the device yourself. Trust minimization to the max is also a great device that you can use in your multi-sig setups. Opti, your thoughts on the video, man? It's so well done. It simplifies exactly what happened.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, hey, look, you know me, I'm a visual learner, so you understand this stuff. And if you've done the deep dive on Bitcoin and exactly what your seed phrase is, and if you put in the hours to try to really understand what's going on, obviously you've read this information before, but when you visualize it, especially in the context of what's going on, it's obviously like, oh wow. Like I think, to me personally, it really does exemplify just like how bad of an error this was. And obviously, like Drew was saying earlier, and we're really trying to be as objective and not really pile on anyone. It just, like, you can just see with that visual just how catastrophic an error it was. And I think I know some people in the chat yesterday were like, all right, I'm tired of this topic. But this is such a huge pivotal moment for the entire Bitcoin space. And you guys know we are huge self-custody advocates here on the show. Like, we believe still to this day, this is the right way to hold your Bitcoin. Now, obviously, how could we really foresee that AI was going to crack, brute force Coldcard wallets? Like, we've been very adamant, like, we're not really devs. From everything we could verify, it seemed as if Coldcard was one of the most solid hardware wallets in the space. Obviously, yes, there is an aspect of trust, and we were trusting that the developers were actually doing what they were saying. But I think it really brings in the broader conversation where, like, I've seen a lot of people basically say, it's like, oh, you guys are podcasters. You guys are talking about this constantly. You guys should have been able to verify the code for yourselves. And it's like, well, there is the aspect of, we say it all the time, we're not the most technical, so we did kind of outsource some of that trust to the developers, that they were actually doing, the code was actually doing what it was saying, and that people were verifying this. And so we all do kind of have some pie on our face. But I think as we get further away from Thursday, the 29th, and we get more information on this hack, there has been a lot of speculation, a lot of noise. And so we are obviously trying to do our best to give the signal throughout this, or at least as much of the information as we know. And so I just want to keep iterating here. And I know we've been talking about multi-sig a lot, just to, like, get to the heart of this. I think part of the conversation is also, like, 12 and 24 seed phrases, single sig Bitcoin seed phrases were not cracked throughout this process. What happened was, as that video kind of mentioned, the Coldcard entropy, the randomness of the seed generated from Coldcard was truly, one, not random, and two, it wasn't that strong. Again, we've all been kind of seeing these numbers that if you used an MK3 from the 2020 to, I guess 2025 era, your seed phrase was essentially boiled down to, you only created 1.5 words for your seed phrase. Going further, the MK4 and the MK5, because that bug was in there, I think the numbers was somewhere between, you only had 4 to 6 words of the seed phrase to be cracked. So obviously it didn't have the strength, I guess if I put it that way, of a 12 or 24 word seed phrase. And so I just want to keep iterating, because I know everyone's kind of panicked right now, and there has been a lot of good white hat work from a lot of the Bitcoiners, whether it's Kevin from Liana, Rob Hamilton, the BitKey team, even Wicked out there hosting the spaces and stuff to try to calm everyone's fears. It's, as of now, from everything we know, other Bitcoin wallets, whether it's in a single sig or a multi-sig setup that doesn't have a cold card, is not liable to get stolen right now. And that's part of why I think we're going to continue to talk about this throughout the week. Obviously, we do want to get back to kind of normal programming for you guys, but for now, this is such a huge story, and we're really trying to get this information to as many people as possible. So for most likely today and maybe Thursday, maybe the end of the week, you know, I don't want to promise anything. We might be just keep hitting this topic at the risk of the views being down. Like, I want to give you guys the tools. I want to give you guys the peace of mind to know that, yes, okay, look, if I'm not using a cold card to generate my seed, then you are protected. Now, obviously, we are going to get the conversation to long-term best practices here. Obviously, the whole range of suite of products that you can use, or protocols, if that is the best way I could say, you know, systems that you could use to protect yourself so that you can move forward and feel comfortable that you're not going to get hacked. Because look, I'll tell you guys, one of the things we always say, and we stole, you know, we always took this from Nassim Taleb, who's now like an anti-Bitcoiner, but we eat our own cooking here. And yes, you know, Coldcard was a sponsor for us. All of us probably in the Bitcoin space had some form of coin on a cold card, and we all had the panic. Now, obviously, this doesn't make better. Like, this wouldn't make me feel better if I had lost coin, or if you're someone out there that did get wrecked on a cold card during this hack. Obviously, no words are going to make you feel better about losing your life savings and stacking for 8 years and doing all the right things, and now they're gone. And, you know, again, like, our heart goes out to everyone. I just feel lucky that I used older software. I used an MK2 to generate my seeds, so I was out of this exploit. But what I am seeing is everyone is kind of getting caught up in like, wait, are we protected? Am I safe here? And obviously, again, we have been talking about multi-sig, multi-vendor, multi-sig, collaborative custody, or even, you know, one of our sponsors, the BitKey here, that does have multi-sig, though it is, you know, you are adding some trust because it's all through block. But there are ways to protect yourself right now. And I really am trying, I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we are not adding to the panic here, and trying to do our best to explain to everyone, and even to ourselves. Like, all weekend, I was freaked out. You know, Friday or Thursday night, I had to move some coin. Wasn't really aware of what the bug was, just like cold card vulnerability. Friday, we got more information. Saturday, I was checking my, you know, my latest hardware, or sorry, my latest cold storage setup where I moved my Bitcoin to, because we really didn't know what was going on, right? So I woke up Saturday morning and I checked my Bitcoin wallet to see if my Bitcoin was there, because I didn't have enough information yet of what exactly had happened. Now, by Sunday, by Monday, you know, today on Tuesday, we have a way better idea of what is actually happening and what happened. And obviously, I think for the next couple of weeks, we are all going to feel a little uneasy about this, because we're still seeing the AI attack happening, the AI exploit happening, and we are seeing on the flip side that the Bitcoiners are using AI to shore up the security of these Bitcoin wallets and these long-term storage of your Bitcoin. So for the next couple of weeks, I think we're all going to be feeling a little uneasy, but it does lead into just the further conversation for the next couple of months. Who knows what's going to happen with these new AI models. And obviously now we have essentially like the first, maybe battle is the wrong way to put this, but as we've been all talking about, you know, the token wars or the AI versus Bitcoin wars, like this is the very beginning of that. And who knows what's happening in the future. Hence why we're trying to continue to be like, okay, best practices. Is your setup right now safe? Obviously, start thinking about how to protect your Bitcoin long term. Now that we have new threat vectors here, we have new attacks that we weren't even aware of before. But I still just want to continue to explain to people that, you know, Bitcoin, the protocol, your seed phrases weren't cracked. It was a cold card specific issue. And, you know, like that should, once you understand a lot of the stuff going on, it should start to put a little ease of, you know, a little peace of mind that like, okay, I am protected, at least obviously for now. Maybe I need to go a little more hardcore on my security protocols here. But obviously, also, as I was mentioning, I think it was yesterday or maybe Friday, also you gotta factor in, are you that technical enough to do the movements? Like, are you able to get your Bitcoin off these wallets if there is an issue? And I think, as I keep saying for a while, like we're all maturing through this process. And I think when you are in a panic scenario, you never really think about the bad things happening. You think about, oh, everything's going to be good. I feel safe. You know, we are kind of lulled to sleep with this self-confidence that like, oh, no, I got this. It's going to work out. I'm protected. But as I felt, you know, I felt the panic and I was sitting there like, man, maybe I almost got ahead of my skis here. Luckily enough, you know, I think a lot of us got ahead of it. We were able to protect ourselves. We did the homework we needed. But man, it really just doesn't make you feel any better for all the people that lost coin out there. It's brutal. But this visualization by Bitcoin Policy Institute, shouts out to them for doing it, because you really start to visualize, just like I said a minute ago, how bad of a mistake this really was. And it is kind of putting the aspect of Bitcoin self-custody in question. And we've seen a lot of our friends and a lot of Bitcoiners go like, hey, maybe you just need to go to an ETF or go to the exchange. And we recommended going to the exchange too in the temporary, in the short term. But it really is just a temporary measure. And that's just so you can get out of the cold card, protect yourself in the moment, and so that you can give yourself a little time to get better at your self-custody and really ensure that nothing like this can happen to you ever again. So, I mean, great work by everyone involved, you know, all the Bitcoin developers, Bitcoin Policy Institute. You know, I do want to give a shout out to one of our friends, Sessions, out there. He's constantly doing the same streams. And I have said, another little tangent, I have seen a lot of people get very cynical right now of like, you know, the influencers are to blame, you know, NVK is to blame, the developers are to blame. Like now they're shilling even more products. It's like, hey, we're all just trying to protect ourselves here. And yes, some of them are products by Bitcoiners. Some of them are stuff that you can do for free. But I think now it is an all hands on, you know, on deck moment where everyone should be out here trying to get the best information out there for you guys. And it's not like we're trying to milk this topic here. It's just like we can't cover everything in one show. Yes, sorry for the guys out there. They're like, I'm tired of this conversation. But this is a moment where we all have to really reevaluate how my personal cold storage is, what I need to do. What are the best kind of protocols to do? And we've done this a lot on the show before. Yes, sometimes there's bigger news stories and you know, the news hype cycle gets. So sometimes, you know, I've noticed a few times we haven't talked about self-custody on this show for months at a time. And then I'm like, okay, I need to go back and we need to go back to basics. But yeah, man, it's just brutal. Sorry for rambling. I think now that the kind of the cortisol spiking has died down a little bit. We are a little more sober. We have a lot more information of what happened, how to protect ourselves. And I just hope that you guys out there are starting to feel a little peace of mind that, okay, You know, I am safe for now. Caveat on the for now aspect of this. But if you are out of Coldcard, and I mean, I just would recommend everyone just get out of Coldcard. Obviously, I did see yesterday, like if you're still in Coldcard for whatever reason and you felt like, okay, I did my 100 dice rolls, I have a strong password on it. We did get confirmation from multiple people yesterday that those seed phrases are in fact safe. But that's why we just sent, until we knew what was happening, it was like, just get off a Coldcard for now. But, you know, we even internally, we had a couple people on our team like, yo, if you just rolled the dice and you got the 100 dice rolls for entropy of your seed phrase, like, you're going to be good. And at first, since we didn't know, we're like, yo, I would get out of it. He's like, no, like the math is good. And now, again, we have confirmation from independent researchers that is in fact true. So there's been a lot of confusion. And, you know, we're going to do our best to not add to the confusion, obviously not add to the engagement and clickbaiting of it. We're trying to get to the signal and the heart of what exactly happened, what you can do to protect yourself, and how we move forward from here. So anyways, enough ranting for me, I suppose.
Yeah, guys, we're going to transition. We're going to continue to give you guys more context, more breaking news regarding this subject matter. And then also we're going to be talking about Bitcoin nation state adoption. So we're going to be right back just after the break. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin. Here's something most Bitcoin holders never figure out until it's too late. You're sitting on wealth you can't touch without selling. Ledin fixes that. Bitcoin-backed loans. You keep your stack, you get cash. And they just introduced their lowest rates ever. No complexity, no fine print. The larger the loan, the lower the rate. These new rates apply to all new loans, refinances, and renewals. You'll see all the rates up front before you apply. The new, lower rates come with Ledin's gold standard protection. Your Bitcoin remains custodied and is never lent out for interest. Perfect 8-year track record of keeping clients' assets safe. Auto top-ups, LTV alerts, and partial repayments to keep you in control. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties or monthly payments. Ledin's perfect $10 billion track record through every market cycle in the last 8 years speaks for itself. Don't choose between a great rate and the safety of your Bitcoin. Get both at Ledin. If you ever thought, what happens to my Bitcoin if something happens to me? Or what happens if I lose my phone? You're not alone. For a lot of people, the biggest barrier to self-custody isn't buying Bitcoin. It's the fear of making a mistake. And that's why I like Bitkey, and I recommend it to my friends and family. Bitkey is a Bitcoin wallet built for real life. Not just for day one, but for everything that happens in between. Lost devices, upgrades, accidents, and long-term ownership. There's no seed phrase to write down and worry about losing. And no single point of failure that can lock you out of your Bitcoin forever. What really stands out about Bitkey is the peace of mind. Recovery is built in. Inheritance is built in. It's a complete self-custody system built by the team behind Square and Cash App, designed to make holding your own Bitcoin simpler and safer. Take self-custody of your Bitcoin today using Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world and use promo code SIMPLY for 10% off your new Bitkey. That's bitkey.world, promo code SIMPLY. I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy across 3 continents, HIVE runs dual engines, Bitcoin mining and AI compute. Their AI platform is ranked #1 in the world for network performance, and it's doing something bigger than compute. It's accelerating human discovery, the science, the breakthroughs, pushing humanity further and faster. Listed on the NASDAQ with the ticker HIVE. Catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech on X or hivedigitaltech.com.
You secured your Bitcoin, but did you secure your devices too? They're still broadcasting your location and digital footprint. GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell, 5G, EMF, all of it is leaking. Escape Zone fixes that. Their Faraday bags block every signal your device emits, so you decide when you're detectable, not the grid. Built for Bitcoiners who know sovereignty isn't just your wallet. It's your phone, your hardware wallet, your keys, and your entire digital life. Go to escapezone.com/simply and use code simply for 10% off. That's escapezone.com/simply, code simply.
All right, everybody.
Wait, hey Nico. Unless you got something, but I see the chat is they're like fighting right now. And we're gonna have a guest pop in here, but I guess maybe to pass the time, I do want to kind of cover what's going on in the chat here for a moment.
Okay, but before we do that, can I give a shout out to our boys over at the Bitcoin Way?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I do want to give a shout out to our boys over at the Bitcoin Way. Again, if you want someone to hold your hand through this transition process, go to thebitcoinway.com. Here's a post from one of the founders, Tony. If someone felt threatened by Bitcoin dominance and self-custody, what would they attack? Not Bitcoin's code, your confidence in your ability to hold it. They would amplify every failure, turn every hardware wallet bug into an indictment of self-custody, make sovereignty feel reckless and dependence feel responsible. The recent Coldcard situation is serious. Some people have lost funds because vulnerable wallets were created. That demands accountability, investigation, and better security, not a retreat into custodianship. A defective tool does not invalidate the principle. Bitcoin has not failed. Proper self-custody has not failed. Blind trust in any single device or vendor has. Verify your entropy. Test your recovery. Reduce single points of failure. Key word. We've heard that multiple times on today's show. Fear will drive many back into the cage. Let it drive you towards better self-custody instead. The alternative is still dependence. Choose carefully. Wise words from Tony from the Bitcoin Way. Again, if you need help with the transition away from Coldcard, the Bitcoin Way, they got your back. All right, Opti.